We are live. Really excited for this week's episode 30, called Networking is Key, How It Fits into Effective Marketing. We are very excited to invite my good friend Barry Braunstein of Barry Braunstein Photography to this week's episode. Barry, before we dive into hearing all about how networking fits into effective marketing, can you tell us about one cool networking event you've been to recently?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Cool networking event. It was a little bit ago, but it was a chamber speed networking event. And it was very cool because you really got to have your elevator pitch down. You get to meet a lot of people. It's rapid fire. You get 2 minutes, 1 minute per person. And I met a whole bunch of great people there. So.
It was. I actually went to that event. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it, and then I actually borrowed the idea for a training I was doing, and it's a very cool way of connecting with a lot of people really quickly. Well, my second question before we dive into the meat of the discussion, Barry, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I'm a headshot and portrait photographer for individuals and businesses. Creating headshots you'll actually love that amplify your brand. I have a studio here in Wellesley. I also go on location for my corporate clients. And yeah, awesome.
Well, so Barry, as we were talking about this episode, we came up with this title, Networking is Key, How It Fits into Effective Marketing. And I really love this point, but I'd love to hear you. Let's just start off with what are your thoughts on this? How does networking fit into marketing?
It's critical, particularly I think for small business owners, right? I mean, we're like the pimple on the elephant's, you know what, right? You're a small business owner, you're here in a big city or whatever, and you're trying to get yourself recognized and known. And so you try a whole bunch of different, but you have a bunch of different marketing things that you do. And one of the most important ones I found is networking. You got to get out there, you meet people. And the whole idea about it is don't think about it as selling. You got to think about it as marketing, right? You're trying to get brand awareness. You're trying to meet people. You're trying to, get your name out there, become more visible. And I've been doing it ever since I started my business, and it's been successful. You just got to remember it's a long-term game. You can't expect to go to an event and say, oh, I didn't get any leads from this, it's not worth it. You just got to keep at it. So, but no, it's so important. And you get to meet great people, establish relationships, learn about people's businesses. They learn about your business, and you get referrals, you get business. And you also, I'm a helper. I love helping people. And so I feel like when I go there, I'm always on the lookout for people and businesses, because you never know when somebody's going to say, hey, do you know a good website designer, or a good financial advisor or something like that, or somebody that does wine events or what have you. And, I love to be able to say, yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a guy or a gal who can do that. Right. So
I think there's a lot of value. I always talk about adding deposits, Barry, and how important that is in relationship building, especially early on. So I completely relate to that. Steven's also a really great example of doing that very quickly. But yeah, whether it's knowing someone who can add value, or you think someone would be interested overall in a conversation, I think it goes a really long way.
Yeah, I agree. I've been at events where I was talking with somebody who I hadn't met before, and we just got to chatting. And I always like to ask a lot of questions about their business. I don't like to just sit there and say, well, I'm a headshot photographer. I want to talk about the other person and learn more about them and everything. And I was at this one event. It was here in Wellesley, and never forget, the person said, I'm really looking to redo my website and everything. And I was like, oh, well, I know a couple of website designers, and there was somebody that I knew who was a website designer, 10 feet away. So I went over and introduced them. And I don't know if it turned into business or not or anything, but, I felt really good because I made a connection for somebody right then and there and was helping, right? And so, and you never know where all of that's going to lead. And if nothing else, you help somebody, and that's a good thing.
Totally. It's the karmic cycle of networking. That's what I like to call it. That even if you give someone something, even if they don't give something, like you don't get something from them, chances are down the road, you're going to get something from someone else that maybe you can't provide something in return for. So I like that idea of always trying to make connections. I know with me, when I'm going into a networking call where I haven't met someone before, that's something that I always try to do is, who can I introduce you to? How can we better intertwine our networking webs to create an even bigger one?
Yep, exactly.
And I fully agree. I was just gonna say, I fully agree on the long-term approach, right, Barry? Like I've seen you, I think, for the last year and change now at networking events. And it's just funny where, again, that means we've been going to the similar events for the chamber for over a year, among other things. But it's been pretty wild where I just think of last week, there were people that I had not, I probably only met once or twice, but my name was coming up in their small networking group now around, hey, yeah, we're trying to do this wine event. Does anybody know a guy? And it's like, well, yes. And I asked two, and it was apparently two people in that, and it was one person I had only met one time. So it's pretty wild when you think about that. And it was a person I had met one time some months back. So it's pretty wild, but it's definitely the long term, and 100%. It's all about giving first. Especially.
And I think that it's also the I'm going to put this in quotes, the leads that you get out of it. I think they're further down the sales cycle, if you will, than you would get just from a cold lead coming in off the web or something, because it's a referral, right? It's somebody who, met you and maybe knows you better or not so much or whatever it is. But those always carry more weight than just a straight lead coming in off the transom. Right.
They 100% do. We've talked about that on this podcast before, about how if you were just to pick up the phone and cold call people, it's like a 5% chance that you even get a meeting, let alone close the deal, versus if you are referred into a business or someone refers you a business that is a trusted advisor. So someone goes to Steven and says, hey, like, I need a headshot. And Steven says, oh, I know Barry. He's really great. You should work with him. That's like an 80% chance that they're going to go with you, because the person who referred them understands the need, and the person who referred them also understands your business. So it's just a perfect pairing there. It makes it so easy. But I just have a quick question about your background. So photography and networking. How did you get into the photography business, and how, like, what was first? Like, did you start, you love photography and then you started networking? Did you have another career and then you liked photography, and as you networked, how did it all come about?
Okay. So, I had a long career in high-tech sales and marketing. And then about right before COVID, not knowing that COVID was right around the corner, but right around before COVID, I was working at a job at a company, and it was time for me to do something different. Let's just put it that way. And so I had been shooting since high school. Loved photography, had acquired a bunch of toys and gear and all of that stuff, and had done some paid gigs along the way and everything, but always kind of like, there was always in the back of my mind was be like, I'd love to just do this as a business, and see what happens, right? So I looked at my experience, which has been in business, marketing, selling, etc., and headshots, because of my business background and connections. And I had, by the way, been doing networking in that job. I was working for an engineering services firm, and so I did a lot of networking in the Boston area with high-tech firms and at Mass Robotics and MTDLC, I think it is, or Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council events, and I just did a bunch of that stuff. And so it kind of just fell together that headshot photography would be the thing that I would be best at. And so I wound up doing some marketing consulting as well as the headshot photography. Did that for about a year, and then realized one of them had to go, and so photography won. And I'm having a blast. I love it. And the networking. The interesting thing for me, anyway, is that I'm actually a shy person. It doesn't necessarily come naturally, but I've got developed all of the skills and sales skills and everything. I've been selling since I was like 15. And so, I've developed a routine and understood that you need to have your elevator pitch down and you need to be able to talk to people and be succinct and, all of these things. And it just kind of came together. And so, I still, to be fair, I still have to push myself to go to a networking event. There's a little voice inside of me saying, why don't you just sit home and watch the Red Sox or something, But when I get there, I always run into friends and people that I know and everything. And then the time just flies by and I wind up staying late and, it works out. So
it's funny you say that. I feel like this podcast could have a separate name of networking for introverts because we talk so much. We have so many guests who are like, I'm actually a little introverted and networking doesn't come naturally for me. So, and I think, the theme we hear is often that the introverts are people who maybe are a little bit more shy, end up making the best networkers. And we talk a lot about active listening as well. So, and it sounds like you do that as well. As having
very much so. Yeah, I think that's key. Yeah, when I was managing sales teams, the salespeople, a lot of them would do what I used to call show up and throw up. Right? They'd go on a sales call and they just immediately start pitching. And my style has always been, I want to ask a ton of questions. I want to know what's going on. What's your problems? What are the things that are keeping you up at night? What are your priorities? All of that stuff. Because as a salesperson, I can't even begin to think about what the solution would be for the problem that I think we're meeting about until I understand more, right? And maybe it's not even the right solution. So that same kind of philosophy, when you meet somebody, I want to know about them. I already know about me. I've been living with me for years. So I want to know about them and see, oftentimes there's connections and things that you start realizing that you have in common, and it's fun to learn about stuff like that.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you've seen? Well, I don't know. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to go with what are the biggest networking mistakes you see newbies make, or what is the advice you are most likely to give folks who are sort of new to the networking scene? I don't know. You can
maybe you can answer both.
Yeah, I can answer both and also talk about pet peeves maybe about some of this too. One of the first pet peeve that comes to mind is when I'm talking with somebody and we're obviously involved in a conversation, somebody will come in and just immediately just interrupt and say hi or whatever it is. And I'm like, I don't do that. You wait till there's like a natural break or something in a conversation. And people will just do that. And I'm like, dude, or whoever it is, right? I don't say this, right? But I'm in the middle of a conversation here. Can you at least wait for a break or something? And I think a lot of the other thing that I hear a lot of people doing is, again, the showing up and throwing up. They feel like they've got to talk about themselves and their business so much, and they're not really having a conversation about stuff, right?
Right.
That's one of the things that I think people miss. And that also, I got my list, I guess. The other thing is that people come in with like a preconceived notion that I've got to meet 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the goal. Would I like to meet a number of people? Sure. But I'd rather have one really good conversation in depth, regardless of where it might go with, rather than going around and just handing out 20 business cards, and meeting with 20 people. Absolutely. And so I think you got to go and make it real. It's, obviously there are things when you reach the natural end of a conversation to exit and everything, but I've seen people do this. They just want to jump from group to group to group to group or whatever. And it's like, no, don't do that. All you're doing is just trying to meet as many people as you can. And I don't think that's the goal.
Yeah.
You can feel the, it's not as authentic, right? And
Yeah.
I think you can sense
Exactly.
that when
Yeah.
we talk to
Quantity
someone
or
and they start
quality.
looking around mid conversation.
Yep.
I agree with you. I think it's good we talk a lot about having maybe some objectives in mind, especially maybe if you're not super thrilled about going to an event, but I
Sure.
could not agree more with you. Having a authentic connection is worth the while, right? And you can always go to more events. That's how you can keep meeting people if you figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you belong to something like the chamber, that you can get a list up front. And I learned this. It's funny. I would go look at the list up front of the attendees, but I wouldn't necessarily reach out to them beforehand. And the tip that I got from this other webinar that I was on was if there are some people you really want to meet, reach out to them ahead of time and just say, hey, I see you were both going to the event. I'd love to see if we can find a few minutes to chat and get to know each other. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
There's so many people typically at events, so being able to get some time on the calendars is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's certain people who are maybe better connections for you than others, or higher priorities. So that's all fair, but doing that ahead of time, a little bit of planning.
Yeah, I think on that one though, especially now, unfortunately, with the number of people that don't show up, but are really interesting people to meet with. That significantly enhances the chance that that's going to happen, right? If you just go and, hey, I'll see them if I see them, well, then you're going to forget about them in reality, right?
Yep.
And then it doesn't happen. So I've done that quite a few times, and then it's the pre-reach out, then it's the, hey, they're not there, and then it's the post, hey, didn't see you there, but love to continue that conversation, do the LinkedIn thing, and find time to chat, whatever it might be. So I've done that to be great. I have a question, Barry.
Sure.
So as you've kind of evolved from your prior college corporate sales role to where you're at now, how have you seen the transition in your networking? Different types of things that you've done, different approaches, things that you do differently now for whatever reason. Love to hear.
That's a good question, Stephen. I hadn't thought about that. So the networking that I used to do was fairly targeted, and they weren't the events. Most of the events that I went to weren't as social, I would say, in the sense that they were either meetings of a technical group where somebody was giving a presentation, and then we'd get together and just kind of network afterwards and stuff. And so it was more focused on the business, and I think there was less socializing going on. Plus, you wouldn't see, the meetings were further apart, and so you wouldn't see the same people over and over again. Whereas now, I think I have the ability to develop relationships with more people because the frequency is more, and you're seeing these people more often. And plus, everybody's doing something different. Whereas when I was back in industry, everybody was involved with engineering and high tech and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a broader, field of people and what they do.
Yeah, no, that's great, Bear. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's with the chamber rate, you could probably go to 10 events a month if you wanted to, if not more.
Yeah, really. Particularly if you want to crash the ones that are, like the young 30 somethings or whatever, which I passed it a while ago. But the chamber, not to give I guess we can give a plug. Why not?
Absolutely.
So Charles River Chamber. I belonged to Boston for a while. I belonged to Metro West, and I belonged to Charles River. Charles River is far and away the best chamber I've ever had experience with. Not that I've had a ton of experiences with them, but I've been with them several years. They have more events. They're more focused on the small and medium-sized businesses than any other chamber. And it's just very active. So I try to go to as many of those events, obviously, as I can. And you also get to know the leaders of the chamber, the people who work there. And I've even used them if I'm trying to meet somebody, I saw them on the list, to go up to them and says, hey, I'm trying to find so-and-so. Do you know who they are?
Yep.
And they'll come over and introduce me or whatever it is. So you can use that. The more you go, the more familiar face, get to know the people, the leadership and everything. And also tell them they're doing a good job, which they do. They like to hear that. And it's all part of, helping everybody. So.
No, fully agreed on all those counts. And I think a plug is completely appropriate. I'd agree.
One of the we're going to get somebody from the chamber on this show. I don't know. It'll happen.
We have a lot of members on this show, I will say, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
get a little discount code. Join now.
Yeah.
We should do that. That'd be fun.
Right, right. I
So-
do think Barry, too, I'm so sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, and Taylor, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna make a quick note about being a part of an organization, right? It's great to go to events and do in-persons, but I think being a member of an organization is just that extra level. And then we've been told this quite a bit, and I completely, feel the same exact way, as being as active as you can. So not only participating in the events, but to your point, get to know, the board members and the folks running the show. And if you can become, a co-member or part of board of directors, as involved as you can be, it really pays off at the end of the day. So I think that was a really great piece of advice that you mentioned there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're welcome to respond first, Mary, if you want. I was just gonna bring it in. We just before we went live here, we were talking about some of the sort of more kind of regular, networking groups. There are a lot of them out there. There's of course BNI. Barry, you and I know each other from within the chamber. They have small networking groups. But interested in your take on those and kind of the role that they play.
Yeah, so there's different kinds of networking groups that I've come across, right? There's the ones where you, like a BNI, which is very structured, and I think they're more focused on B2C versus B2B. And it works for them. They meet every week. They have a really tight structure in terms of what they do, and they're tracking metrics and all of this other stuff. There's other networking groups where they don't have many guests coming in, and they just meet on a regular basis, and you get to know each person in depth, and everybody gets 5 to 10 minutes to talk every time they get together. Then there's other networking groups where there's always new people, there's members, there's always new people, and you get 2 minutes to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, right? And I find they each have their place and pluses and minuses, right? The chamber, I think, is also a good mixture. We have a sub-networking group that you alluded to, Jeff, a smaller one that we meet on a regular basis. And that's more of the, we have a little bit of structure, but not too much, but we're really getting to know the people, and we talk about, we have the opportunity to even talk about issues that they have and looking for some advice or whatever it is, or if you know somebody, right? And I think those have worked out for me very well. And then others like, Tip Club is the one where, you get 2 minutes, go around the room, and then you want to meet with somebody. And if you're going to really do anything, it's going to be at a separate meeting and everything. And those are valuable too, right? So, I think having a good mixture of different types of networking groups, I know worked for me. Because they each bring something different to the table.
Absolutely. I have a sort of related question, which, since going back to the title of this episode about fitting into an effective marketing, but I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about LinkedIn and the role it plays. And
absolutely,
would love to hear your. I think we've talked a little bit about this, but I think you've got a good take on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where does LinkedIn play into the whole picture?
So I've been on LinkedIn since it was founded, way back when, and then they got acquired by Microsoft and all of this. I've used LinkedIn over the years for networking, research, connecting with companies, getting meetings and stuff. LinkedIn to me is a wonderful resource for, again, as part of your marketing strategy, if you're doing B2B, of getting getting yourself noticed. And it's good for networking. I think you got to be a little bit judicious as to like not accepting everybody who wants to connect. But by the same token, being open to connecting to people that it might make sense to connect, right? I'm a premium member on LinkedIn. I have been for years. I post on LinkedIn on a regular basis. If I meet somebody, I will connect with them on LinkedIn immediately. So I'm up to like 5,000 something connections, I think. No, I don't know everybody, and can't remember everybody from all of that. But LinkedIn to me is, again, it's part of an overall marketing strategy. You can't rely on just it to give you business or make connections with. On the other hand, if I'm interested in seeing if a company might be interested in my services, I'll try and figure out how I'm connected to somebody within that organization who's in a position to make the decisions, and try and reach out to them, and not to try and sell them, but just to try and connect. And ideally, if we share some common connections or themes or past lives or whatever it is, I'll make sure to do that. And then they're then in my feed. So when I post, they may happen to see my post. I'm very much of a soft sell kind of person. I don't do cold calling. I don't like just hounding people and putting them in an email drip campaign and just, one after the other. That's just my style. So I'd rather just generate awareness so that when or if they do have a need, I'm top of mind, right? So that's and LinkedIn is a very good platform for that.
Absolutely.
I completely agree on the soft sell, Barry. I think that's, again, building authentic relationships, trust, all of the things. With LinkedIn, I agree with you. I think it's a great tool. It's a great research tool, connector tool. There's so many people, even if it was just Charles River Chamber, there's so many people that you're meeting. So just being able to have them in a bucket, for one sense of it, and folks get new jobs. You right, did a career change. So maybe that person who you might have had a few conversations with years ago sees your updates as well. I'm in need of this. I can reach out to Barry. So I agree with your thoughts and perspectives on soft selling, but also LinkedIn overall as a tool. I think it's very important.
Yep. And all of this is a long-term game. It's a long-term thing. You can't expect that, I made a post and nobody reacted to it, or I didn't get any leads out of it. You just got to keep doing it. It's, it's like advertising and market conditioning and all of that stuff, right? It's a way of getting out there and becoming visible.
And it's a long-term game for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so it is a long-term game, but we have run out of time on this episode. Segue. I will never try that again. Barry, this has been a terrific conversation. I'm sure we could keep going for many, many more hours on this. Obviously, a topic we all love. But that said, we like to always close the episode with a little lightning round of what's one cool networking episode. What's one cool networking event that you will be going to in the next maybe week or two?
So there's a chamber breakfast on Wednesday, the 14th of May at the Sheraton. It's their business breakfast. And usually those are very well attended. The Charles River Chamber, I've gone to the ones at the Marriott, and there were 300-400 people there. So, and again, always good to go there, not just to network, but also to reconnect with people you may have not seen in a while. So,
Absolutely. Well, I will jump in next, but before I do that, Barry, what's the best place for people to find you?
My website, BarryBraunsteinPhotography.com. I apologize for the long name, but it is what it is. Either that or you can give me a call, and all my contact info is on my website, but that's a good place to see my work, understand what I do, and hopefully have an opportunity to connect.
Awesome. Well, for me, I've got a couple of events this week related to the University of Rochester, where I went to business school. There's a meeting with the outgoing dean, and then there's another meeting. We have a monthly group that meets up, and so for our May meeting. So I will say those are my cool events for this week, and I will pass it on to, I don't know, Taylor. I'll give it to you.
Yes, I have a crew women in commercial real estate heavy events scheduled this week. We have a entrepreneurship and leveraging communities luncheon tomorrow, and then I'm part of the developments and projects committee as a co-chair. So we're doing a hard hat tour at Boston Sand and Gravel in Charlestown on Wednesday. So that'll be exciting.
That's cool.
Cool.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen?
Well, it is the season of galas, right? So I had the Reach Gala, which is also a chamber member, on Saturday.
Yep.
And have a couple more of those coming up. And then I'm really looking forward to the CFO Leadership Council meeting tomorrow, which is CFO Pathway to the Boardroom. So I think that's going to be a pretty interesting session. So that's, but this week is just loaded, not surprisingly.
Awesome.
Nice.
Amelia.
Yeah, so I have an event tomorrow with Portal Innovations, so I'm really excited about that. But what I'm really the most excited about is I'm actually moderating my first panel on Thursday. So for FEI Future Leaders, if anyone's listening, please come. I'd love the support. But I will be, I guess, interviewing, moderating, I don't know, leading a panel with 4 other people who are all about mid-career. And the topic will be coffee with your younger self. So looking retrospectively, looking at yourself as a 22-year-old for where you are now.
Oh, dear.
Right? What did you do wrong? And, reflecting on it all. So
I've had that conversation with myself many times, looking back and saying, you did what?
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of conversations with your younger self, we are actually off next week because the 4 of us are going to be doing a panel event at UMass Boston with a bunch of great students there who are hopefully going to have better conversations with their future selves because of
That was good.
It's better than my earlier segue. Barry, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks for having me.
We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Sounds
Thank you.
great. Bye, everyone.